Hi there, friends. I hope you're doing well today. Thanks for clicking on my video and coming to my channel. I thought I would change the scenery a little bit today. Come show you one of the beaver ponds while we're filming this clip. I had a great question the other day, or suggestion rather, for a video, which was what it would take to go off the grid. It was an intriguing thought to me, so I put some thinking to it. Even managed to take a couple of notes because I'm a little old-fashioned like that. And thought I'd come and talk to you about the top 5 things you are probably going to need to go off the grid. So before we get into the meat of the thing, the top 5 things, let's talk about what off the grid is in the first place, because some definitions might be in order, right? What is off the grid? Well, to me, off the grid is when you want to live, or when you are in a situation where there is no service grid. And by services, this is what other people pay to give you, usually for profit, and you get something in return, but you don't do it for yourself. Like, for example, bringing in food. You go to the store, that's a service. When you turn on your tap and you got water coming out, unless you dug that well and put in the spout and the pump, odds are you're getting a service. When you flick on the light switch and you've got lights or television or home security, somebody else probably set that up for you, so we call that a service, right? So being off the grid is to do without those services. You're on your own. Now, we got a little bit of a breeze here today, so I apologize if it gets a little windy here. I'll try and speak up. So, to me, off the grid is living without those services. Now, up here, we have very little cellular service. It's terrible, actually, for me. There's no wire and there's no pole, so no internet unless you've got Starlink. Well, we saw I've got that set up, right? So why would anybody want that in the first place? Well, sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes it's forced on you. Sometimes we need it in order to get back to basics and maybe value some of the parts of our existence we've taken for granted. So that's why some people still go camping or have a cottage. In my case, it was kind of forced on me to a degree. I always wanted an off-the-grid cabin. I wasn't yet ready to transition to it, but here I am. It wasn't entirely my idea. Or rather, it wasn't, the timing of it wasn't quite right. I would have preferred to have a couple of years to do this, but here we are. Okay, so why else might you want to do this? Maybe you're tired of paying monthly bills for services that you are finding that are increasingly dropping in quality or availability. That could be it. Or you just want a degree of independence and self-sufficiency that you probably may not be able to have in the cities. Right. So who is it not for? It's not for you if you are dependent on that infrastructure. So let's say you're dependent on hospitals, you're dependent on a lot of the offerings of civilization, or civilization, as my granddad used to say. Merci, grand-papa. You got to consider that maybe this is a little too much responsibility to take on for yourself. So it might not be for you. If you like convenience, if you enjoy being able to flip a switch and everything you need is there, if you enjoy being able to go to the store and saying, I want that, if you're picky about what you eat, there's all kinds of reasons why being off the grid may not be for you. You might be limited in many ways. What does it give you, though? Well, look at this. This is what I get to listen to and wake up to. Sounds of birds, the wind in the trees, peace. That's for me. All right, moving on to the top 5 things you're going to need to go off the grid. The first thing, and probably the most important of all, the most essential, without which you're not going to do it, is mindset. 90% of human performance, maybe more, is mental. If you're not aligned with the idea of being responsible for yourself and all of the level of planning and activity that entails, then this might not be for you. Might not be. You need to really take on the spirit of self-sufficiency to live off the grid, and fully. Enough about that. Learning attitude. You do not know everything there is to know about living off the grid. No one does. It's a constant learning process. You have to have a learning attitude. If you do not have a learning attitude, you're going to miss out on all the great lessons nature itself has to offer you, as well as all of the great people out there who have come before you and have done this and have a lot of knowledge to pass on to. So you need a learning attitude in a big way, I think. Another major one is that you're not the boss when you're off the grid. Nope. You might be the boss of you, sure. Mother Nature is the boss. Mother Nature rules all. We make plans, Mother Nature laughs and says, no, you don't. So please keep that in mind. Living off the grid will sometimes not be easy if you need to have control at all times. Mother Nature is in control at all times. Any illusion of control you might have, it's going to get crushed out here. So, nature in charge. You're probably going to need a good measure of situational awareness. With situational awareness, you might notice, for example, that there are some heavy clouds coming on the horizon, and maybe some thunder coming. If that's the case, you may want to head indoors, unless you like braving the elements to a degree that gets to be not fun. Situational awareness. When you are isolated and off the grid, it can mean the difference between life and death, especially up here in the north, where temperatures will drop down to -40, no problem during the winter. So that can be kind of deadly. I'm sure if you're doing off the grid in the desert, you've got your own concerns that don't have anything to do with freezing temperatures. All right, so mindset, big one, top one, number one. The second thing you're probably going to need out here off the grid in a big way is people. And I don't just mean one or two people, you might need a network of people. And the reason I say that is because you don't know everything there is to know about living off the grid. In your specific area, you might know a lot. And if you do, hats off. If you know everything there is to know, then share some of that with me. I could use it. No, but seriously, you need to keep that in mind, that other people probably know a little more about at least one thing more than you. So it might do you well to get to know other people who have similar goals. When you work together, you actually lessen your workload. You might find that there's lots of like-minded people if you're interested in going off the grid. And you might be able to help each other out. And when you help each other out without asking anything in return, really interesting things can happen for you. Really great things. So be open to talking and discussing with people and developing a network of people. Cultivate that network of people. Find what you have in common. You might notice that others have the same interests as you. So your people networks are a big part of living off the grid. The third big thing you're going to need is probably some sort of storage. Unless you want to live a fully mobile existence, and there's lots of people who do, it's doable. You're still going to be tied to some sort of infrastructure requirement. If you're going to be mobile with a horse, that's part of your infrastructure, and you got to feed the horse and care for the horse. If you're going to do the van life thing, you're going to need to take care of that van. It's another mouth to feed. All of these things require some consideration, and they all come with a storage need. They all come with storage needs, which is thing number 3. You need storage when you are living off the grid in some way. If you're off the grid on a motorcycle, you still need storage on your motorcycle. If you're on foot, you're going to need some sort of storage in the form of a pack-sack or a bag. You need storage for your stuff. If you're in the north, you need more stuff than you think. That's enough about storage. You're going to need some. Thing 4 that you're going to need is hand tools and gear. I wrote hand tools because when you're off the grid, this implies that you don't have easy access to fuel. And many modern tools are run with some sort of fuel. Now you can also do well by picking up battery-powered and rechargeable tools. I use a lot of rechargeable tools in my building work that I do over here. You'll find that anything that can be renewed, replenished on its own without you having to leave your area is beneficial. This gives you more time to do things you need to do in your area to help yourself to be self-sufficient, rather than going out there in search mode, because search mode requires energy. You have to displace yourself. You need to buy fuel or walk a long time or get a horse. I think you get the drift, right? You're going to need some way to obtain the things that you cannot build yourself. So I chose hand tools and gear as thing number 4 as my big top one. Hand tools, again, because fairly easy to maintain. Plenty renewable so long as your carcass functions. You can probably use a hand tool. You may not be great at it at first, but using it every day, you will learn how to do it correctly eventually. Or you can shorten your learning span by going online and taking up a few good videos or learning sessions remotely, or you could even go find training locally on how to do something. You might find that there's a lot of great ways to use hand tools, and you won't need as much gear if you can make do with hand tools. Hand tools are more portable and easier to move around than big machine tools. So keep that in mind. There's a lot that you can accomplish with an axe and a shovel. In terms of gear, you're going to need some clothing that is appropriate for the environmental conditions that you find yourself in. Whether that's the desert, the high Arctic, or in our case, the boreal forest of the north, you're going to need some gear. Right now, it's summertime. We got beautiful temperatures. I can wear a t-shirt. This is pretty good. But this only lasts a few months of the year here. So the rest of the time, I'm pretty bundled up, and I got lots of layers. So you're going to need some sort of gear, and you're going to need to be able to maintain it when you're off the grid. So make sure that you have at least the ability to hand sew things, because or else you're going to be caught in that consumer life cycle of buying more clothes on the regular. I know, because I'm tough on my clothing and my gear. All right, so that was thing number 4, hand tools and gear. Number 5, and probably the single most important one after thing number 1, which was mindset, if you'll remember, because all of the others, 2 and 3 and 4, you can acquire if you've got thing number 5. Thing number 5 is knowledge. So if you know how to talk to people, you can develop people networks. If you know people, you can maybe even cultivate those networks, and you will have a great resource unto itself right there. If you have a bit of knowledge, you can make your own storage. If you have a little bit of knowledge, you can work with hand tools and gear in a minimal amount of it, and how to build your own other tools from there. So knowledge is thing number 5. It's very, very powerful stuff. To live off the grid, you're probably going to need to know a little bit about yourself. Especially if, like me, you're doing it in a somewhat solo fashion. Because right now I'm up here alone mostly. I do get visits, but I'm the only one up here full time at the moment. You're going to need to know a little bit about yourself and how you handle adversity. And if you don't, well, it's a great opportunity to do so when you're off the grid, because you will encounter adversity at some point in your off the grid experience. And if you don't, you've probably got a lot of money and were able to buy your way through adversity. And that's doable if you've got enough money and resources. Not this cat. All right, enough about yourself and knowledge. Other than yourself, there is knowledge everywhere. There's knowledge right here in this bush. All you have to do is take the time to be quiet inside so you can open your eyes and ears and look around. A really good friend of mine who's now passed away called those in-holes. They're in-holes. You can take in a lot of information through those in-holes if you just take the time. So here, all kinds of knowledge all around you. Out there on the web where you're watching this from, there's a ton of knowledge as well. Now the problem with the web is it's not time tested and true necessarily. How do you make do with that? How do you make sense of what's time tested and true? Well, you have to do your research. You have to be responsible for yourself and do some of your research on your own. But really the only way to know for sure, even anything I tell you, is to go out and do it. Test it yourself. You don't know anything until you test it yourself. So anything you see online, including this YouTube video, or if it's on Rumble, on the Rumble video, you need to go out and test for yourself, validate for yourself. Another great place to find knowledge and information is books. Books is the same way as anything you find online. You have to use a little bit of critical thinking. Who wrote the book? Why do they want you to know it? What's motivating them? I generally will consume books that help me become more self-sufficient. So if the book offers some form of self-sufficiency, I'm probably into it. And the last really rich source of knowledge out there that should never discount is people. There's people all around you, probably, unless you grew up alone in a test tube or in a vacuum, in which case you might not know many people. But the people you know all around you might have a lot of knowledge and experience to offer you if you want to go off the grid. If they don't, you can reach out to people online, and you can reach out to people physically. You can go and see people who are living off the grid who will gladly share with you what they are doing. If you're a friend of mine, you're welcome to come up here and come and see this. I will gladly show you how I live and how I do it. And I hope to do that also via my videos that I'm recording for you. So lots of experiences out there you can benefit from. Go out there and do it. All this knowledge is nothing if you don't go out and apply it. You must apply it for it to really be knowledge. All right, so those were the 5 things. 1 is mindset, 2 is people networks, 3 is storage, 4, hand tools and gear, 5, knowledge. Now, even with all those 5 things, you might not be able to make it off the grid. And why? Because you're probably going to need to plan. If you're not off the grid now, you're going to need to get off the grid if that's where you want to go. You're going to need a plan. And plan is just a way of looking into the future, or the possible futures, and figuring out what you're going to do to get from A to Z or Z. If you're one of our American friends, you've got a plan. If you're just going out there to bumble around and figure your way through it, I don't know, maybe you'll get to it, but it's probably better to have a plan so that you're not wasting your time and your energy. So have a plan. Personally, I would start with learning about some of the primal skills. If you don't know where to start, can you make a fire with what's around you? Can you find safe water to drink that won't make you sick? That'll sustain you. Can you find food? Can you forage? Can you build shelter with what's around you? If you don't know how to build things like a basic shelter, you may have a hard time building your own cabin or your own house. A lot of folks out there make it look really easy. It's not that easy until you actually try it, right? So you need to try it and then you'll have the experience. So start by going in small baby steps. If you've never built anything, start by building a shelter. Foraging is finding food from everything that's around you. And here there's food everywhere in this video shot, believe it or not. Right? Do I know how to get to a lot of it? Some of it, yeah. Not all of it. I'm still learning, remember? I'm always learning, including the vegetation here that's around me. So if you'd like to learn a little more about that vegetation with me and you'd like to hear what I learn about some of the things that are here, post that in the comments. So I'll go ahead and take the time to make a video about that. You might want to learn how to fish and hunt. There are times when foraging is not indicated, and you're better off fishing and hunting if you want to find food. Now, fishing and hunting are high energy activities usually, unless you're using techniques that may not be legal in your jurisdiction. So think about what you're doing when you're fishing and hunting. But fishing and hunting have yielded a lot of nutrition for people over the centuries and millennia. It's not a wrong approach. Just bear in mind your local laws. By far, though, the two biggest ways that you can ensure that you can live off the grid is to provide for your own food by growing it or by raising it, animal husbandry. Admittedly, I've got a ton to learn about all of this stuff. So as I learn about it, I'll share what I can with you. But that's a great way to survive what's happening these days, or to live off the grid. If you can grow food, if you can raise animals, guess what? Somebody else has a need for that and is likely willing to give you money for those things. In which case, you might have a basis for trade. Or maybe you know somebody who can do machining, or somebody who knows how to do carpentry when you don't. So some of the things that you learn how to do to sustain yourself, you can use in trade to help out others, and in turn they will be able to help you with what they can trade. That's kind of how we got to this point, isn't it? And last but not least, you should go out there and build something. If it's been a long time since you built anything and you want to consider going off the grid, start by building something. Living off the grid is investing in yourself and building on yourself. If you can't build something small and tangible to start with, you're going to have a hard time building yourself up into living off the grid. So just build something, whatever you do. If it's just with sticks and string and rope, go ahead and build something. Right. I think that's enough about how to go off the grid. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Share it as wide as you can. Now, I'd like to wrap up with some of the great sources of knowledge and information I found out there on the web, and specifically YouTube. Survival Dispatch. Fantastic stuff up there. I recommend you take a look. It covers a really broad swath of a lot of things you're going to probably want to consider when you want to live off the grid. If, like me, you find that you always have more that you can learn about solar power, I highly recommend Do-It-Yourself Solar Power with Will Prowse. His content really brought me up to speed with some of the basic information I needed in order to set up the components that I did have at hand to get my solar up and running, and of course to consider what I'm going to do to upgrade it. Components on the way. I'll let you know all about that when I get there. Probably going to post a video about it. All right. Finally, there's two more I want to mention specifically. Townsend's great content. If you're into knowing how some of the old school folks did it, wow, you really can't do wrong by going to look at Townsend's. A lot of it revolves around food and food production, and that's a really big part of being off the grid, is ensuring that you can feed yourself. So check out his content. Great stuff. And last but not least, if you want to learn more about the nature that's around you, get started with Learn Your Land. There's a lot of fantastic information there. I am a subscriber to all of these channels that I just mentioned, so go ahead and check them out if you'd like. Highly recommend them. I think that's all I've got for you today. I've gone on at length. Again, I apologize for the wind. Now, if you would like to see more of this, please let me know. If you have any suggestions for more content, please let me know down below in the comments, and I'll be glad to look at that. Folks, I love you all. I'm the Frugal Gunny, and I got zero tolerance for evil. Take care of yourselves.